So what are bylaws? Bylaws are the legally binding rules by which an organization is governed. They set forth the structure of the organization and how meetings are to be held and what type of rules regulate those meetings. Bylaws are also important because they protect the minority and allowing the minority to discuss and to make motions and to be heard at a central committee meeting. Bylaws are, again, legally binding. These protect the rights of the minority, and they're in writing for a reason. Again, they're how you govern the organization. Notice that the bylaws of the Ohio Republican Party and the State Central Committee state that they cannot make a primary endorsement for the Ohio Supreme Court primary, state legislative races, and congressional races unless it is in accordance with policy guidelines adopted by the Central Committee. According to the last policy guidelines, they were only good for the last primary, and they're not good for this primary. So we do not have a set of primary policy guidelines at this point for the Ohio Republican Party or the State Central Committee. While this may seem to be a minor or trivial thing, really it's not. The bylaws, again, are the binding set of rules that govern the organization. Without the primary policy guidelines adopted by the State Central Committee, no ORP candidate services, so no in-kind contributions can be used for those that were endorsed without primary policy guidelines being adopted. It's not a trivial thing. It's very important. And unfortunately, as you'll see from the video, we have our justices that were endorsed without primary policy guidelines.
In mind, I have the following resolution. Whereas Justice Pat Kennedy had announced immediately prior to our meeting that he would, Justice Pat DeWine had announced immediately prior he would not seek the office of Chief Justice, but that he would be seeking re-election as Associate Justice to the court. And whereas all three justices independently have expressed their support for a blanket endorsement by this committee, and whereas given that the loss of any one of these three seats on the Supreme Court would constitute the loss of Republican control of the court, therefore the screening committee voted unanimously to recommend to this body that all three justices be endorsed as a slate of three for the particular judicial seats they are seeking. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would now like to move, pursuant to Article 6, Section 2B, that this body endorse as a unified endorsement Justice Kennedy for Chief Justice, Justice Pat DeWine and Justice Pat Fisher for Associate Justices of the Ohio Supreme Court. One unifying vote.
One of the things they do is do the
Thank
endorsements
you.
with
We have a
primary
second
to block any
for that motion.
races.
Is there any discussion? Seeing no more there's no discussion at all. Okay. Seeing no more discussion, all in favor of endorsing Justice Sharon Kennedy for Chief Justice, Justice Pat DeWine for Associate Justice, and Justice Pat Fisher for Associate Justice, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Justices, congratulations.
So now we're a little bit pregnant. We endorse in some primaries way before the filing deadline, and this will get used against people who are not for endorsements.
So what we just saw there was a blatant violation of the bylaws. The chairman should have brought to the attention of the treasurer or the parliamentarian or any one of the multitude of lawyers that were in the room, should have brought to their attention that the bylaws say that they need to have a primary policy guideline. Now, I'm used to seeing in many other such endorsements that they will actually bring up who was on the screening committee, why they were qualified in order to be able to screen these people, and why they felt that they were each individually qualified for that. Now, they've all been around for a long time, so I would imagine that that process would have been brief. But there was no attempt even made to suspend the bylaws, make a motion to suspend the rules in order to be able to endorse these people. So technically, no, they're not endorsed. They were endorsed in violation of the bylaws. If there is a state central committeeman that's out there that feels that bylaws are important, that they should follow them when they do benefit and when they don't benefit you, then they should raise a stink about this. I know it'll be unpopular, but it's something that a good organization does, that they adhere to the rules that they set out, and they don't just pay attention to them when it serves to benefit them. There's a reason that there's a process, why that process was adopted, why it was voted on, and it does help to protect minority and dissenting views. So hopefully we'll get a state central committee person that will send a cease, stop, and desist letter to the chairman and to the director, Justin Biss, asking them to retract the endorsement because it was in violation of the bylaws, and that would set up for a December meeting then for an adoption of primary policy guidelines.